Thanks for joining us today for our first webinar of 2021. Happy New Year to everyone. Today we'll be talking about two really fascinating Japan destinations, Hokkaido and Okinawa. And I should mention that this webinar is really brought to you by popular request because we get so many questions about planning these two destinations for luxury travelers. So today, I really want to give you an introduction to the top destinations, accommodations, and activities in Hokkaido and Okinawa, and how to incorporate them into an itinerary. So starting in Hokkaido, as I'm sure most of you know, Hokkaido is Japan's northern island and actually its second largest. And in our opinion, it really provides the best opportunities to experience Japan's wilder and more adventurous side. It's also a very important destination for ski, as it's one of the snowiest places on the earth. And the great thing about Hokkaido is that it can easily be included in most itineraries, even first-time itineraries, first-time visitors to Japan itineraries, since it's very convenient to access from Tokyo. Most of the major cities are accessible by direct flight, and the southern city of Hakodate is actually accessible by Shinkansen from Tokyo in just about 4 hours. So when talking about Hokkaido, first I want to introduce you to some of the most well-known Hokkaido's destinations. I would say the top 4 are the ones shown here. First of all, we have Sapporo, Hokkaido's capital, and actually a relatively new city since it only had a population of 7 people in the mid-1800s. And Sapporo is really a good access point for a lot of the ski destinations in Hokkaido, including, of course, Niseko. And so often people will stay just for one night on their way to or from skiing. But I will say that Sapporo is definitely worth a longer stop during its famous snow festival held for a week in February. During this time, you can see hundreds of incredible ice and snow sculptures, some of them up to 50 feet tall. So you can see in the picture here, it's literally a building. And then outside of the snow festival, Sapporo is a really pleasant city with some nice shopping and dining. It doesn't have any super high-end accommodation, but the JR Tower Hotel is a pretty good option. And the Sapporo Grand also has some nice suite rooms, but full disclaimer, it's I think it's the oldest international hotel on Hokkaido, so it is a little bit dated in terms of style. Now, not too far from Sapporo, you have the very quaint harbor town of Otaru. It has a really scenic canal area and an interesting old financial district with well-preserved merchant houses and office buildings. So this can really be a nice day trip from Sapporo, or it works great as a stop between Sapporo and Niseko if you have clients who are going to Niseko for skiing. And then jumping all the way to the south, Hakodate is a popular destination since it's easily accessible from Tokyo and has beautiful scenery and very delicious fresh seafood as well. And moving on to talk about what's probably Hokkaido's best known destination, Niseko. So Niseko has really become Japan's luxury ski hub and is home to some excellent powder snow. One thing to note about Niseko is that it's definitely not off the beaten path anymore. It has become quite touristy and can become very crowded during peak season. So, we do get travelers who complain that it doesn't feel like Japan just because they're more likely to encounter international guests and visitors, and even people working within the resort will tend to be foreign. Rather than Japanese people. And then also the infrastructure is still trying to catch up with demand, which means that during peak season, for example, it can be impossible to find a restaurant unless you've made an advanced booking. So that's just something to be aware of. That being said, it is also home to some really amazing and unique ski experiences. One of Niseko's distinguishing features is its views of the volcanic Mount Yote that you can see pictured here. And you can actually hike to the top of Mount Yote and ski inside of its crater. So that's really a great experience for super active ski and snowboard enthusiasts. The easiest way to access Niseko is from Sapporo's Chitose Airport, and it takes about 2.5 hours from there by private car. So just to give you a brief introduction into the layout of Niseko, I won't go into this into too much detail since I know not everyone sells ski and is going to be interested in this, but I wrote a lot of information on here so that you can refer back to the presentation if you need. For now, all I'll say is there's basically 4 main ski areas in Niseko, and then one kind of smaller area that's a bit of a different case. So from right to left, you have Hanazono. This area is pretty small, but has some great backcountry, a good snow park, and some of the best powder snow on sunny days. Up until now, there wasn't much in terms of facilities in this part of the resort, but this is really beginning to change with the opening of a Park Hyatt there at the start of 2020. Then moving down, we have Grand Hirafu. This is by far the largest and busiest part of Niseko. This is a bustling town with lots of facilities and nightlife options. So great for couples who really want that resort nightlife experience. But it's important to note that there are few ski and ski out accommodations here, and the beginner slopes are quite limited. So that's why for families, we like to recommend Niseko Village as an alternative. This area has some good ski and ski out options and is very family friendly. A lot of the English speaking ski lessons will start from this area, and the ski area itself is fairly diverse. And then finally, we have Annapurna. This is one of the smaller and less crowded parts of Niseko, so good to head over there during busy season when it can get pretty crowded. But despite its size, it also has some of the best powder and backcountry options in the entire resort. However, it is important to note that the chairlift that connects Annapurna to the rest of the Niseko ski areas does close during bad weather, which can leave this part of the resort isolated. So probably not good to head over there if the weather is seeming a little windy, for example. And then close to Annapurna, we have the one that I mentioned is kind of a different case, the ski resort of Moiwa. It's still quite small, and it doesn't actually belong to the same ski pass as the other areas. So there's a ski pass that allows you access to the 4 areas that I just mentioned. Moiwa is on a different ski pass. But the main reason I mention it is because it's an area that has great potential in terms of snow quality. It's not crowded, and it's expected to greatly develop in the next few years. There's a very ambitious development plan with an Amman property actually scheduled to open there in 2023. So here I've listed some of the top accommodation options in Niseko. As you can see, there are a lot of luxury offerings and more are due to open. In Hanazono, we have, of course, the newly opened Park Hyatt, but also for travelers who prefer a ryokan experience, Zaborin is a great option with private open air baths. And it's not next to the resort, it's not ski and ski out, but it does offer a shuttle to the Hanazono ski area. In Grand Hirafu, the Vale has an incredible penthouse suite for your really top VIP guests. And then there are also a number of luxury chalets available with private chef and housekeeper in this part of the resort. In Niseko Village, currently there's a fairly decent Hilton, which I would say is solidly 4 stars. And then a Ritz-Carlton Reserve actually opened there last month. So we have yet to inspect it, but from what we've seen, it does seem like it's going to be a good option in this part of the resort. And then finally, the Annapurna and Moiwa areas, they have not traditionally had any luxury accommodation options, but very excitingly, as I mentioned, an Amman property is scheduled to open in Moiwa in 2023. Now, as I mentioned, the one downside of Niseko is just how busy it has become. And the crazy thing is that Niseko is just one tiny place compared to how large Hokkaido is. And there are many other amazing winter options on the island. So that's why we like to encourage our travelers to combine Niseko with other less traveled destinations in Hokkaido, just to get both experiences. And if you joined our Off the Beaten Path webinar last year, you'll recognize how we approach planning more remote destinations by basically splitting them into 3 categories: day trips, overnight stays, and special interest destinations. Special interest destinations being those that require a little more of a commitment to get to, but that are well worth the effort for more adventurous travelers. So I just want to introduce you to a few Hokkaido destinations in each of these categories. Starting with day trips, Rusutsu and Shikotsu would be our top recommendations as day trips from Niseko. For ski and snowboard fanatics, Rusutsu is only 30 minutes away from Niseko, but offers amazing backcountry, fewer crowds, and it even has heli skiing options for people who are interested in investing in that type of skiing activity. And then for families or travelers who want to do other activities beyond skiing, which is something that we get asked a lot, Lake Shikotsu is a great option. It's easily accessed from both Niseko and Sapporo. There's a fun ice walking activity there where guests can put on a dry suit and walk on the ice on the lake, but also swim in the lake. And then there's some really stunning snowshoeing to be done, including a path that takes you to what they call the Ice Palace. That's what you can see in the bottom left picture here, which is just this really amazing ice structure that they have in that area. A little further afield, Furano is what I would categorize as an overnight destination. It's a 3.5 hour drive from Niseko and a 2-hour drive from Sapporo. It is worth noting that it also is directly accessible from Tokyo via the nearby Asahikawa airport. So it also works as an alternative to Niseko if, for example, clients are not interested in paying Niseko prices during peak season. Now, Furano is a ski destination in its own right, and also a good base from which to explore other resorts in that area. I won't bore you with all the skiing details, as I know not everyone's interested, but I've left some more technical details on this slide. And basically what you need to know is that it has a solid offering, just slightly less snow than Niseko does. Now, it doesn't have the same range of luxury hotels on offer as Niseko, but the one I listed here is a comfortable choice. To be honest, that's why I think it's great to combine the two destinations. For example, you could have guests starting in Furano for the more adventurous part of their trip that's going to be really ski or snowboard focused. And then they could move on to Niseko for the luxury hotel experience. That way, you know, if Niseko is crowded, if there's queues for the lift and they don't get as much skiing done as they had hoped, they won't be frustrated because they'll have got the kind of major skiing out of the way in Furano. And then Furano also has a lot of other activities available, such as ice fishing, snowmobile tours. And then I feel like I need to explain the snow picnic one. Basically, it's not just a picnic in the snow. They actually take you snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, and then you stop for lunch at a mountain lodge for a private dining experience. Now, one of the other main reasons why Furano can be a good choice for luxury travelers is because of its proximity to Kita Taisetsu. And going to Kita Taisetsu is really going to be the ultimate experience for ski and snowboard fanatics who have a good budget, because Kita Taisetsu is a ski resort in its own right, but it's actually shut to the general public now. So the only way to access it is through a private cat ski tour, meaning that guests have the entire resort to themselves. They're going to have this huge array of untouched powder snow where they can make the first tracks. And then for those who are interested, there's also some ice climbing in the area I thought I would mention as well. So moving on to our special interest destination, which is basically the entire eastern part of Hokkaido, because I don't know if you noticed, but the destinations we talked about, those popular destinations, if you look at them on a map of Hokkaido, you'll see that most of these are really concentrated to the west of the country. And so the reason why East Hokkaido is such a wonderful destination is not only for its nature and adventure potential, but also for the interesting relationship between culture, and particularly Ainu culture, and nature in the region. And so for those of you who may not be familiar with Ainu culture, the Ainu are Japan's, and more specifically Hokkaido's, indigenous people with their own history, traditions, and language. If you joined us at the Rep Fest event last year, you'll already be a little bit familiar with this destination as we introduced attendees to a friendly Ainu couple for a craft experience. But today I just wanted to tell you a little bit more and go a little bit deeper into this area. And I specifically want to introduce you to two areas, the Kusharo area and the Shiretoko area. The great thing about these areas is that they are easily accessible from several good regional airports with direct flights from Tokyo and Sapporo. So it wouldn't be so difficult to combine with a Niseko winter trip, for example. But this area is also great in other seasons as well. So starting with the Kusharo area. Now, the main draw of this area is, of course, Lake Kusharo itself. It's Japan's largest caldera lake. And then there's the connected Kushiro River that originates from the lake and flows all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Other points of interest are Mount Iyo, which is an active volcano that has the highest concentration of sulfur in Japan and is constantly emitting steam. And then Lake Mashu, which is thought to be one of the world's clearest lakes. It actually remains inaccessible to humans and can only be viewed from observation decks, which is one of the reasons I think why it's so blue and clear. Now, one of the really great things about this area is that there are some good accommodation options on the higher end of the spectrum. One of them is this glamping site, which is actually run by our partner company, Wonder Trunk & Co., and is located right on the edge of Lake Kusharo. There's even a sauna tent, so you can take a sauna and jump into the lake if you're feeling brave. And then for those travelers who are not into glamping, there are also some excellent guest houses like Wakanupuri that has only 2 rooms, but each with a wonderful private bath and lake views as well. It is important to note that both the glamping and Wakanupuri are closed in winter. So if travelers visit during this season, we would recommend a more traditional ryokan option like the one shown here. Now, when it comes to activities, as you might expect, most of these focus on enjoying the area's wonderful nature. The canoeing is one of my personal favorites as it's a really great way to experience Lake Kusharo and also see some wildlife while rowing down the river. And then one of the more unique cultural experiences in this area is, of course, this Ainu craft experience that we introduced at RepFest. There are also some great winter experiences available in the area as well. I've listed a few of these here on this slide, but I think the important thing to note for winter is that going here in winter is really going to be a chance to visit somewhere with absolutely no other tourists, and it's going to be a great chance to connect with nature in a kind of unique way because you'll just be in this tiny village covered in snow with other locals, basically. Now moving on to the Shiretoko Peninsula, this is a chance to see some of Japan's most untouched nature since no roads lead further than about 3/4 of the way up the peninsula, and the northern tip of the peninsula can actually only be viewed by boat. So here you can see some of the main sightseeing spots with one of the main access points being the town of Utoro. And then Shiretoko is actually also a popular destination in winter as it's one of the best places, or I should say one of the only places to see drift ice in Japan. And the good news again is that there are actually some nice onsen ryokans in Utoro, like the Kitakobushi Hotel, which has great views of the sea and nice private outdoor hot spring baths. And the good news is that this hotel is actually open all year round. And then finally, in terms of activities, this is one of the places in the world with the highest density of brown bears. And you can also see whales, foxes, and all kinds of birds, either on a cruise or on foot. And then in the winter, you can also walk on the drift ice for some really unique perspectives as well. So here I have just highlighted 2 quick 3-night itineraries that include Shiretoko and Kusharo. We have one for the green season that you can see here, and then also one for the winter season. We don't really have time to go through them in detail, but I wanted you to be able to refer back to them if needed. As Maggie mentioned, we'll be sending through a PDF of the presentation afterwards. And so that is it for Hokkaido. So now to completely change atmosphere and season and weather and travel to the other edge of Japan to Okinawa. So Okinawa Prefecture, also a really fascinating destination because it's just so spread out. It's of course Japan's southernmost prefecture, and it's in fact a collection of islands that span over thousands of kilometers. So interestingly, some of these islands are actually going to be much closer to Taiwan than they are to Japan's southern Kyushu region. And then of course, the big draw to Okinawa is its subtropical climate that makes it the ideal beach getaway destination. And the good news is that Okinawa is easily accessible by domestic flight. It takes close to 3 hours to fly from Tokyo to Okinawa's capital of Naha, but there are also direct flights from Tokyo to most of Okinawa's major islands aside from Naha. And so because Okinawa is so spread out, it is helpful, I think, to think about it as divided into 3 distinct areas, which is the 3 areas I've listed here. The first is the Okinawa Islands, including the Okinawa main island and its capital, Naha. Now, the Okinawa main island is probably the easiest to include into a Japan general itinerary, as it has a lot of high-end resort options, as well as many facilities and services. The Ritz-Carlton and Terrace Club Busena are 2 great resort-style options in the northwest of the main island, while Hayakunagaran is a nice, more traditional, almost ryokan-style option to the southeast. And so the advantage of choosing to send people to the Okinawa main island is going to be, of course, the convenience, but also the chance to experience some of the area's rich history and culture. There's a lot of World War II history in this part of Okinawa, as well as some important cultural experiences and sites. So Okinawa basically used to be its own kingdom called the Ryukyu Kingdom, can never pronounce it. So they have their own traditions, language, and culture. So you can experience that on this main island as well. Sadly, the World Heritage Shurijo Castle, which was a really important site on the main island, almost entirely burnt down at the end of 2019. So that's just something to be aware of. It's not expected to be rebuilt until 2026. The Okinawa main island also going to be a great access point to the Kurama Islands that you can see here on the bottom right. They have some of the best beaches and diving in the entire prefecture. The downside, I will say, of the main island is just the distance between things, so between hotels and activities. For example, the Ritz-Carlton, it's 1.5 hour drive from the airport, and then it's a 1 hour drive from the port to get to the Kurama Islands. So there will be quite a lot of driving involved once you're on that main island. And then there's also kind of a limited access to nice beaches. So for example, Hayakunagaran does not have its own beach. So that's why I think for people who want to travel specifically to Okinawa for its beaches, the 2 other areas of the prefecture may be better. Miyako Island, it's not a place that we typically send travelers to, but it does have wonderful beaches. And it is going to be our top recommended spot for experienced divers, as the diving there is really interesting. There's a lot of underwater tunnels and shipwrecks to explore. And although there are not many high-end accommodation options in this area, in recent years, there's some luxury rentals that have opened up. For example, the Grand Bleu Gamin that you can see pictured here. And there's a nice Marriott property called Irafsui on the island as well. Now, this leads me to our top area recommendation for Okinawa. This is our team's favorite area, the Yaeyama Islands. Now, the reason why we like to recommend these is that they offer a range of experience and environments. So Ishigaki on the right, for example, that offers a pristine white sand beach experience, while Iriomote is going to be a totally wild jungle environment. In any case, this area is going to be easy to access through Ishigaki Island directly from Tokyo. And so just to tell you a little bit about the main islands to visit, first of all, Ishigaki. So that's the second largest island in the area, as you can see from the map. And Ishigaki is really going to be perfect for tropical activities like diving or snorkeling. There are amazing beaches on the island, and then we also really recommend the sunset cruise. And so, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead, but this is also going to be where we recommend most travelers stay. There's an ANA Intercontinental Hotel that just opened there last year, and then the Fusaki Beach Resort is a solid choice as well. And so another island that is well worth the visit, which is very nearby to Ishigaki, is Taketomi. This is a really small, very laid back island. You can see on the map here that it is really tiny and very close to Ishigaki. It's also home to the Hoshinoya Resort, which is probably the most high-end option in the Yaeyama area. So this is a good option if travelers want to spend most of their time relaxing at the resort. But if they want to do more exploring, then we would probably recommend still staying in Ishigaki, just because even if Taketomi is only a 10-minute ferry from Ishigaki, the logistics can get a little complex if you're trying to go back and forth a lot. So that's why, if they're really wanting to explore the area, Ishigaki is just an easier launching pad, I would say. But in any case, Taketomi is a really great place to relax by the beach or embark on a relaxed island cycling tour. Now, finally, the last island I want to discuss is actually the largest one. It's the island of Iriomote that you can see on the map here. And so the main draw of Iriomote is going to be its totally wild and untouched jungle environment. Because of this, there are not really any very high-end luxury options in terms of accommodation. So most travelers will probably feel more comfortable staying on Ishigaki and doing day trips from there. It's only a 45-minute ferry from Ishigaki to Iriomote, so it's totally doable to do it that way. But once you're on Iriomote, there is so much to do. One of the main draws is the Pinaisara waterfall, which requires kayaking down a river and then trekking through the jungle to reach. And then there's also the possibility to explore some caves and embark on some unique wildlife tours. I think Iriomote is home to a very rare species of wildcats that is almost impossible to spot. I think there's only a handful, but that is something that you could spot on this wildlife tour. And then very interestingly, you can also travel to the nearby Yubu Island. Probably the main draw of going to Yubu Island is how you get there, because it's only accessible by water buffalo. So you can see in the picture here, the water buffalo actually drags you across the water to get to Yubu Island. So that's it for my very quick overview of Japan from edge to edge. Please let me know if you have any questions. And I've also left my contact details here if you have any kind of longer questions you want to follow up with.